What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. I'm Cameron Selby, and we are going to be breaking down the Week 9 showdown slate between the Baltimore Ravens and the Miami Dolphins. Both teams are reeling, but coming off of convincing wins in Week 8, and we are going to be rocking and rolling, seeing which AFC team can kind of start a trend and go on the up and up. Really appreciate you guys tuning in so far. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you think. Going into this showdown, it should be an interesting one. I'm not sure how exciting of a game it'll be, but at the end of the day, exciting games can always lead to profitable payouts as well. If you watched last week's video, we broke down the Chargers and the Vikings slate. Obviously, that game was not competitive. It was barely watchable with how uncompetitive it was, but we took down. We had the optimal line. We had the nut. That was the first time this year that it happened. Second season in a row. One blowout game ends up, even though we don't know what the game script is, don't have confidence in that line, ends up taking down. So you just, again, never know when it's going to pay off. Hopefully we can go 2 in a row, though. That would be really cool. But even if we don't, let's have a really strong start to the week once again. Last week, the main didn't go as great. But at the end of the day, if you take down, you're going to end up with a profitable weekend. Also, college football, a lot of notable things that went down. So please check down our breakdown, Dusty's breakdown of the college football slate and everything that transpired over the weekend, what is to come as we enter November. Yeah, go show that video some love as well. Without further ado, let's get right into this one. So kicking off, we're going to start with the Baltimore plays. And this is a very interesting, way too early to break down. And we'll get into why. And that Q tag is the very big reason why, because that doesn't mean that we have different results of who we are picking to win this game necessarily, but it could have a very different result in how we approach the slate, because the most expensive player, the guy that you might need to have in every single line, he may or may not play. And so if that's going to be the case, we're going to have to be comparing and contrasting. We'll do a little bit of hypotheticals when we build later on. But for the time being, we're going to break down the receivers, and that starts off with Zay Flowers. Rashad Bateman, that's a standalone play. There is one guy at 98. He's at 64. The next highest price guy is 54. I don't know if I've ever seen a gap. One guy is priced at 94, Bateman right there in the middle at 64, then there's 54. I don't know if I've ever seen a $4,000 price gap when there's only one player available. Very interesting. It's basically like DK is forcing you to build a certain type of way. But yeah, in turn, we'll go receiver first, and then we'll jump over to the tight ends, because I know the tight end position is very important for Baltimore as well. But starting off with Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers has been the wide receiver one for the most part. Ceiling has been a little bit capped since Lamar has been out or hampered. He has a really strong start to the year with a career best game, 31 fantasy points against Buffalo, but then follows up with a very strong 12 opportunity, 7 for 75 performance the week after. Shocking dud against a high scoring affair in a really solid matchup the following week. Then the following week after that, Kansas City gets blown out. Lamar leaves early. He still does fine for what it's worth. Since then, he's gotten the alpha in terms of the opportunities. He just hasn't scored a touchdown. That doesn't mean he's not viable on this slate, though. I don't know what Miami's done to be first overall, but their secondary, they have no bodies. And essentially, Rasul Douglas playing lights out. According to PFF, he's top 10 amongst the position. But outside of that, Storm Duck now out for the year. So that's like 4 corners they've lost within this last 2 months for the entirety of the season. And yet they're first overall. A lot of that has to do with game script. They've been blown out a lot. But then some of it has to do with they're doing pretty solid against the receiving games. It's not like Baltimore is a passing game to fear. But if there is, it probably starts with Zay Flowers. The problem is, because of guys so expensive on this slate, do you really want to spend up for him at 94? That's the question we'll have to wrestle with later on. Bateman's interesting because he is that standalone guy, like I mentioned, by himself at 6,400. He has obviously not panned out at all, except for this very showdown slate against the Detroit Lions, which that was my tournament play on that slate. And it worked out, except for Mark Andrews goes for 2 touchdowns. If you had to go this guy or that guy, I picked the wrong guy, even though whatever he was, 44,000, and he goes for 17. That's awesome. And you love to see it, but it still wasn't enough at the end of the day if it was just him and not Mark Andrews. And then in terms of the other guys, DeAndre Hopkins has just been flirting around 30 to 35% of the snap shares the entire season. He started off back-to-back games with scores the first 2 weeks, but he's just been a unplayable DFS player for the most part. 6 points is the best day he's had since week 2. And so with that said, especially if Tyler Huntley is in the fold, it's hard to pay up 4,200 for somebody that hasn't even averaged 6 points per game since week 2. And Tylen Wallace, as Walker, it's kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel, because, I mean, Dez hasn't even really played much. Yet he's $1,200. I don't even know if I would even consider him in the player pool. Tylan Wallace gets in. He's played less than 10 snaps each of the last 3 games, has only had 2 games this year with more than 2 targets, 4 catches on the season. $3,000. Why are you that expensive? I don't know, but I'm probably not going to play you. I think there's a lot more interesting values. There's actually a decent amount of value on the slate, but if I'm going to be playing cheap, we're going to have to do stars and scrubs with most of the builds based on the prices. I'm probably not going to be going with the Baltimore receivers as the plays, but they will all be low owned. I don't think a lot of people are going to be paying up for Zay Flowers. I don't think many people are going to go with the Rashad Bateman because it's just weird pricing. And then Tylan Wallace doesn't make any sense, price $3,000. Same with DeAndre Hopkins. Same with Des Walker. So they're all gross. They're all low. They're all low owned, yet any of them can catch a 70-yarder and score a touchdown, and they're going to win somebody a bunch of money. For if and when that happens, I'm probably just not going to side that route. I just think it's too high risk for it with all the value that I think could possibly exceed all the expectations for most of those guys. In terms of the tight ends, Mark Andrews, honorable mention, Charlie Kolar. I don't think the price tag should be this close. For what it's worth, he does play snaps at least. He's played roughly 40% of the snaps every single week, even when Isaiah Likely's been back. Isaiah Likely actually has been 50% or better in the last 3 games. 1 game in week 6 right before the bye, he actually played 81% of the snaps, which was more than Mark Andrews. But Charlie Kolar still gets in about 35 to 40% of the time. While I understand the price tag being that good, it's not like those snaps are really leading to targets. He's just had 1 target per game, and 1 catch for 10 yards is cool when it's a touchdown. But if he just has 1 catch, 10 yards, and that's all he's got, 2 points at 1,600, probably isn't going to get it done. Likely, on the other hand, he's had 2 targets each of the last 2 games and hasn't done anything with it, obviously. But there's a track record, and because of the name and people have known that he's gone off on these kinds of showdown slates, he's getting ramped up in the first part of the season with an ankle injury too. I would think that he's worth a flyer. Just know that he might be the most popular punt on the slate because of the name value. You can still, if you hypothetically played 3 lines like we typically do on these slates, you will probably be overweight to him at 33%. It's not like you'll be undifferent. If you go him and then have 0 remainder, there's probably going to be a bunch of people that have that line, and you're not going to be as different as you think. So just, if you're going to do that, leave some salary, do what you got to do. It is worth noting, though, Mark Andrews, 5,000 seems like a discount. He hasn't really gotten it going outside of the games that he's scored the touchdown. Started out with a dud, and that's why he was our fade on that week 3 slate. Of course, he goes for 2 touchdowns and 91 yards, but he has not eclipsed 35 receiving yards since then. He has not scored a touchdown. Targets are kind of there, but it just kind of feels like he's going the opposite direction of what you want to see for him at this point in the season. And I know a lot of that has to do with quarterback play, but it's not like he was without Lamar Jackson the first couple weeks. So interesting spot, and it is worth noting, before I started recording, I looked at props for picking our props of the night. Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely's receiving yard prop is only separated by 7 yards, and there's a $3,000 price gap. So if I'm ranking tight ends for Baltimore, I'm probably leaning with Isaiah Likely, knowing that we have to go down low for certain guys. Mark Andrews, of course, is always a tournament play and is viable on slates like these, but right now, a $3,000 price gap, not really projected well. It's tough to really get behind at $5,000. Probably less preferred to me than both kickers, if I'm being honest with you. But that doesn't mean that he can't be in the player pool. And then, obviously, the biggest news is Lamar Jackson. And I'm going to put Tyler Huntley just so you know, if and when he doesn't play, 800 is there. The thing is, if Lamar Jackson plays, he's in your lineup. I'm not necessarily concerned about the production. He has been bottom tier against quarterbacks this year, and the only thing and reason why they are 23rd and not 32nd or close to that is just because a lot of them have just been so bad game scripts that the quarterbacks have really gotten the job done and then haven't had to go for the 300 yards or score the 4 touchdowns. Those can always happen, but if you get 2 rushing touchdowns in between that and you're up 3 scores, then it's tough to really get there, especially at a price tag of 11,800, which you definitely got to get 25 plus to get there in this regard. If he does play, which John Harbaugh has said he will be playing, I feel very confident about that. There is now a legitimate track record of saying that I expect him to not miss time. I expect him to be good multiple seasons now. And even last week, there's a whole controversial thing about him being listed as a full participant on Friday with the expectation and notion that he'll play. Fred gets juiced up, and then all of a sudden he gets downgraded out the following day. And come to find out, he's playing scout team, not full participant. That is not how you describe that. And they're probably going to get in some trouble for that very reason. And because of that controversy, and it's a short week and it's on the road, I have a hard time just saying for sure he's going to play. But if he's full participant through a walkthrough, and those are usually estimated reports on Mondays, you have to lean that he will. But I would just be prepared to be without him. And if he's without him, I still think Tyler Huntley's in the pool. But at the same time, because he's the same price essentially as Tua, I think it might come down to this guy or that guy, not necessarily playing both. And if they're the same price, Tyler Huntley, offense looked much better for what it's worth with him in the fold. Very modest numbers, but very efficient, especially in comparison to what Cooper Rush did as a reliever the previous weeks before he did get some run in week 6 and then following the week by being the starter. The thing is, even in his solid game where they dropped 30, 16 points is not going to get it done at that price tag. And Tua, I kind of consider him, foreshadowing a little bit, but I don't love him on this slate. But at the same time, not only if Tyler Huntley is playing, the spread comes down, the game script gets much closer, and Tua has a lot bigger of a likelihood to pan out and possibly outscore Tyler Huntley. So it's a lot of if-then with both of those taken with a grain of salt. I think Tyler Huntley's playable, but I think my interest in Tua goes up way more if Tyler Huntley is the starter and not Lamar Jackson for what it's worth. And then running back wise, it's Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry finally gets in and has a really strong outing. Or actually, he did have a pretty decent outing against the Rams. He just didn't score a touchdown. He got stuffed at the goal line a couple times, but had his first 100-yard game since week 1, and then followed that up with 2 touchdown effort against the Chicago Bears. $11,000. Miami has been killed by running backs all season long. That's why they ranked 28th against the position. Somehow, Bijan, they just shut him down, but a lot of it had to do with just very negative game script for him. In that regard, I absolutely was fooled and drank the tea and the Kool-Aid, but I don't expect that to happen a second week in a row, and I'm not afraid to attack that approach again. Now, if they do it again and it's Bijan and Derrick Henry back-to-back and all of a sudden they just shut both down, then we have some reassessing to do when we talk about weekly DFS slates. But yeah, he's as close of a must-play as there is. The only thing is, because of the high pricing of a lot of guys, tough to get to. And then the other two, Justice Hill, 3,600. He plays roughly 30% of the snaps. His snaps have actually gone down in recent weeks compared to the previous 4 weeks where he was, 50%, 60%. He's had a 30 and a 31% in the last 3 games, and then a 45% against the Rams in a somewhat competitive game, but they were also 2 scores behind. If they are playing from ahead, he is the biggest negative effect of that team. In terms of his possibility, because he's not going to get there if it's a blowout. I don't know, outside, unless you think he's going to score a 71-yard touchdown, and he had 2 touchdowns in that game. That happened to be the only 2 touchdowns that Baltimore scored that entire game. So if that's the case, then whatever. But I'm not going to bank on that happening. I just think if it's a close game, he can get in there and get some PPR points for you at 3,600. Very modest price. Like him much more than Tyler Wallace. He's kind of by himself. Ravens defense, it's kind of a toss-up between the two. And then I do like him more than DeAndre Hopkins as well. And maybe even a price perspective, I might like him more than Mark Andrews because you save $1,400. So with that said, he's in the pool. And also, just worth noting, I don't know if it's too early, but Keaton Mitchell, I think, will get more involved as the season goes on. The first 4 games of the season, he was actually a healthy scratch. And I was pretty surprised after a really strong camp and preseason that he had, that he was just immediately just a non-factor scratch. But at the same time, recent games, he's actually been active. He's played, and he only has 2 of the 3 games where he's gotten touches, but also he's $1,400. So I think he's one of those guys that it's a decent matchup. And if you are playing the narrative of a possible blowout, say Lamar plays, they're up 3 scores, this is a get right spot for Baltimore, maybe that really positively affects him, and he's the main beneficiary. And in that regard, if you're thinking a 3-score game, positive game script for Baltimore, I think that benefits Keaton Mitchell more than it does Justice Hill at that price point. And I think I might take some shares of him because of that possible hypothetical outcome. Now going over to Miami. Miami is interesting. Standalone play, and I know I skipped over the receivers. We'll get to them in a second, but Devon Achane is just kind of one of one. He's one of the safer floors on this entire slate. basically has been, outside of the one game where they lost by 25 against Cleveland, he's been over 16 points every single game. Less boom games than you probably would have expected drafting him as an early to mid second round pick, but he can get there. He had a 2-touchdown, 100+ yard effort there. Hasn't been as much of involved of a big boom play receiver as I thought he would have been once Tyreek Hill went down. That said, he does have 4 receiving touchdowns on the year, so I guess he kind of has. But he's their biggest threat to score. He's their safest player, and he's expensive for that very reason. So very interesting builds, especially if you're assuming that Lamar plays and you really want to squeeze in Derrick Henry. Somebody's got to not play. So you're fading 2 of the 3 guys at minimum between Jalen Waddle, Tua, and Achane in that regard. So it's not the worst matchup. So it just depends on how are you wanting to build, because this is already going to be a stars and scrubs build. But if you went boom, 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 you're running out of space really quickly, especially if you put one of them at captain. So nothing wrong with him whatsoever. Just depends on how you want to approach it. And I'll be very interested to see how the ownership outside it, because I assume that Derrick Henry, Lamar will get the top 2. How does the ownership divvy up between Achane, Waddle, Tua? I think that'll be interesting. I'd like to get overweight to one of them, possibly 2. It just kind of depends on how things go about it. And then if Huntley plays, that might give me a little more interest in the Dolphins as a whole. But breaking down the receivers, you got Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle had another very bad game script, bad weather game against Cleveland. Had a big dud, but he's been awesome since Tyreek Hill went down. He's had a 26-point outing. He's had a 16-point outing. He's had a 21-point outing, basically averaging 100 yards a game, just under the bonus. 2 of those games hit 99, and 95 is brutal if you invested in him, because he's just 5 yards away on both to get 3 extra points. But he's just a weekly threat, and I think he's a low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2 the rest of the season. It is a decent matchup. Baltimore is getting healthier, and they have been more impressive, at least in the last couple games defensively. But they did just allow Rome Odunze to go for over 100 yards as a wide receiver 1 the week before. You had Puka got injured in that game, and I think Devontae still did okay. But outside of that, they've been kind of torched throughout the season against receivers. So a lot of that with health, but that doesn't mean that can't still happen with Jalen Waddle, and he is also a big play home run threat that can take it down at any point in time. The rest of the way, you got to go way down here, and it's a lot tougher to divvy up, talk about, but we'll click on a couple names just to kind of give you a look and kind of explain. So one, D. Eskridge, he's their kick returner. He, in the last couple of games, he's had a decent amount of snaps. Week 6 and 7 had at least 20% of the snaps in both games. Last week, he went down and he got hurt after one play. Carted to the locker room. If you're carted to the locker room and it's a short week, I'm anticipating you're not playing. I know he's $200, but I'm just saying that that's going to elevate a role, because that probably puts Malik Washington back in the kick return role. And on top of that, he hasn't had a boom game, but he's one that's gotten consistent 5 opportunities every single game, essentially. He just hasn't gone off, but that doesn't mean it can't happen. He did just score and had his season best performance this past week. But he's just a very steady guy that's 4,800. Honestly, between him and Mark Andrews, who are basically neighbors at a price point, I think Mark Andrews might be higher owned. He might be slightly better projected, but I think I prefer Malik Washington in that regard. Nick Westbrook-Akine, he's the guy that scored 7 touchdowns on like 20 receptions last year. He's been an absolute non-factor this year. He plays a lot though. 70% of the snaps ish each of the last 4 games since Tyreek Hill's gone out. Has not led to any production or performance. Has been under 20 yards in all games, less than 4 targets a game, 3,200. Just seems a little pricey for somebody that just has not been involved in spite of the snap share going his way, at least. And then Cedric Wilson, wanted to mention him. He was signed for, like, he's been a practice squad guy. He was activated this past week, and when D. Eskridge went down, basically all of that work went to him. So essentially, Cedric Wilson has been a longtime vet, wide receiver 4 for a few years now, and he played a bunch of snaps. So he's less than $1,000, played 30% of the snaps. If and when D. Eskridge is out, he actually kind of dug a little bit into Nick Westbrook-Akine snaps anyways. I think he's viable, less than $1,000. So that's worth mentioning. Also, Darren Waller put on IR because of his pec injury. And on top of that, you also have Julian Hill, who missed this past week due to injury. Non-participant on Monday, going in the wrong direction, obviously. And obviously, 2,400, I'm probably not paying for Julian Hill, even though he was the leader in snap counts 4 tight ends this year, maybe I would have played him. I mean, the last couple of games that he was healthy, he had 5 targets, 3 targets, had about 25-ish yards per game. So that's not terrible for 24. But if and when he's out, and then you got Tanner Connor, probably priced up too much because of all the value there is, but he'll probably inherit the most snaps. He did last week where Julian Hill missed. Darren Waller was his first game missing. He only had 45% of the snaps, but that was the most on the team. Greg Dulcich, I remember that guy from Denver, right? Y'all remember him, wherever he is. Where are you? There's so many guys that are so cheap this week. But yeah, Greg Dulcich doesn't have a catch, but he signed to the practice squad on Wednesday, was activated for the game because of 2 tight ends missing, and he played 28% of the snaps, was second on the team. Don't know if that increases more, but $600, you get a catch and a target, that can be worth it at least. And so he's in the pool regardless. And I think because of the 0 for 0, nobody's really looking at him, but it's just worth noting. And then the other guy, wherever he is, and I honestly don't know much about him, he's at the very bottom below all the IR guys. Hayden Rucci, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that name. He's another guy that was elevated from the practice squad, and he probably will once again be activated if Julian Hill is missing the contest, but he's $200. He played 11 snaps. Make of that what you will. Same thing of if he gets a target, he gets a catch, $200. That helps you save and gets a lot of affording other things, and that just is what it is. Tua, last but not least, he's been pretty bad all season long. Back-to-back games with 3 interceptions. You think there's a possible quarterback change, possible coaching change coming, and then all of a sudden he goes against Atlanta on the road, drops 4 touchdowns, by far his best performance of the year. And so now he is at home in a game script that if it's within a touchdown or 2, he can be viable. They didn't throw for a lot of yards against Buffalo, but if it's a similar game script to where they're just kind of hovering down 3 to 10 points the whole game, he can get there. But if he doesn't, because of the lack of rushing upside, it's really hard to invest and trust in him at $10,000, which is a lot. But at the same time, like I said, if Lamar is out, I'm a lot more interested in him because it basically comes down to, I don't think that this is a fade both quarterback slate. And it's Tua versus Tyler Huntley, and it's rushing style quarterback with less than 20 pass attempts versus Tua Tagovailoa that you know will probably get 30 plus. Can they keep it close enough to where he can score multiple touchdowns and 250 yards, and then 18 points probably going to get there? That's really what it comes down to. It's an if-then statement. For the opposite thing, you typically are just saying if-then whether he plays, but the opposite quarterback, I'm a lot more interested in him because it comes down to Tyler versus Tua. So I'm going to stop sharing, and we're going to go through our must-plays, game scripts, fades, all that fun stuff. A lot of asterisks and stuff like that, but must-plays, pretty self-explanatory. Mine is Derrick Henry. Great matchup, $11,000. And when they're going to be playing from ahead, it's a great game script for him against a defense that's been slaughtered against running backs all season long outside of last week. So I feel really good about him. He's like minus 210 to score a touchdown. His rushing prop is like 91 yards. So if he's a 100-yard threat, he's a touchdown threat. That's a minimum 19 points. If he's getting that spot, and if he's doing that, he's probably going for more. And if he's doing that, then he's probably going to be in the millionaire maker line. Just comes down to whether you want to roster him captain or not. We'll play around with that later. Don't know if I love him as much at captain. I don't know if he's my preferred captain, but I think he needs to be in all your lines. And then on Emery's side, if and when he's playing Lamar Jackson, you probably got to play him. The thing is, 11-8 is really, really, really expensive to play in both, but because of them both being up, I anticipate them kind of getting right. This is a get right spot to where if they're playing from ahead, they're able to score 4 touchdowns. I think both of them can get there, and Emery feels the same way as well. If he's in, just put him in the line. That's really just what it comes down to. And both of us, I feel like we're on similar spots on this one. We're both fading Tua. And again, Tyler Huntley's in. We're going to dabble. But at least in this regard, in this hypothetical approach, Tua, it's hard to trust him. Defense is playing better for Baltimore, and it comes down to just $10,000 is a lot. You probably trust everybody else above him more. There's a path to getting there, but it just comes down to whether or not you think Miami can keep it close enough to do so in the event of the game. If you think it's closer, then yeah, sure, he's playable, but he just has very limited upside because of the lack of rushing upside. You really need him to go for the 2 to 3 touchdown or 300-yard performance, and it's hard to predict that now, especially without Tyreek Hill in the fold. Contrarian plays. Tournament plays. I'm going to go and rock with Rashad Bateman, 400. It's a gross price. I cannot deny that whatsoever. Maybe this is a little bit of, homerism because I called him out on a showdown earlier in the season and it worked out based on his price. Now his price is by far the most expensive it's been on a showdown, and it's really gross investing in somebody for 64. But that said, he's by himself. And I just really don't think, especially because of his recent game logs where he has not had at least 8 fantasy points in any game other than the one game of that showdown slate that I'm referring to, he doesn't project well. He's not going to be owned at all. So he's a guy that if Lamar's playing, you go through the scenario of, okay, he's got a hamstring injury. It's a short week. How is Lamar going to be effective? Well, I don't anticipate that Lamar is going to run for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns coming off a bum hammy. I would anticipate that if and when he's back, he'll be mobile, but it's going to be more so getting the ball out of his hands quicker, or he's going to be effective throughout his arm more so than his legs. If that's the case, somebody that is playing, in good game scripts, 80% of the snaps, I'm willing to take a chance on somebody that's going to be roughly 10% owned. It's a weird price point. It's gross. It's so easy to get overweight, and that's why I like him the way I do. Emery's kind of in a similar boat, though. Ollie Gordon is actually his tournament play at 4,400. I actually didn't go over running backs for Miami. Apologies on that, but just know it's Devon Achane, it's Ollie Gordon, then it's Jalen Wright sprinkled in if you feel like it. With Dolly, he has had a lot of rough outings. Most of that's just lack of involvement. Negative. It's not even negative game scripts for most of them, but he just has not been involved a ton. Last week, he comes in a very positive game script where they're up 4 scores most of the day. Scores a receiving touchdown, 10 carries, 46 yards, really gets going. I don't know if that leads to anything or if that's a one-off and they really just only give him the run if and when they're just way ahead. We don't really have a sample size of that, but also we're not really anticipating that being the game script. He is not going to be that owned because there's a lot of 1 point and 2 point and even a negative 0.2 performance sprinkled in there, but just know that he's getting 25 to 30% of the snaps. He's posted a couple of goal line touchdowns this year from Devon Achane, so I can see it working out. I understand it, and on top of that, the ownership is just not there. He's showing at less than 5% owned right now, so he is too pricey based on his floor that he's shown. It's a decent matchup for what it's worth. In terms of game scripts, kind of a similar boat for both of us. I am right now, asterisk, of course, going Baltimore 34-17. This is obviously with Lamar intending to play. No matter what, I'm going to pick Baltimore to win this game. I just would have a different score, and it would probably be an unbettable spread if and when Tyler Huntley was playing. But Baltimore is just coming out strong, and they have a really fluid and easy schedule over the next 4 or 5 weeks. They've already lost a bunch of games to the AFC opponents. That's a huge tiebreaker for wildcard teams. They're 2-5, so that matters a lot for them with the division that at this point they've got to win it or they've got to get in on tiebreakers. And you're already 3 games down against the AFC this year, so you really can't afford to be dropping these games. I know it's on the road, but you're a touchdown favorite plus. And the offense, I'm just more confident that they looked way more fluid with Tyler Huntley in the fold. So if it doesn't matter who it is, but Lamar coming back, I just think that he'll have a welcoming return to where they will be moving the ball a lot and having some success, putting up points and all that good stuff. Miami, I think it was a little bit of a mirage last week, but I still think that the inevitable is coming, which is going to lead to Mike McDaniel getting fired, Tua Tagovailoa. Not sure if he'll get benched, but at some point moving on, if it continues to go the way it does, this game doesn't really help matters. So I would be very shocked if they really kept it close if Lamar was in the fold. The problem is, how close is it going to be? Because if there is a scenario where they keep it within 3 to 10 or hover around 2 touchdown game the entire game, I can see a scenario because of the way that pricing is where Lamar and Derrick Henry are just juiced up to the top and then everybody else is grossly overpriced. For the most part, with the exception of the punt plays, I can see a scenario because of the pricing where Miami players actually become a weird game where it's a 4-2 Miami build or a 3-3 even build that normally happens on close games that actually gets it done. So that's the thing I'm a little bit less confident about. But at the same time, if you're playing for the blowout, usually you want to build with those 5-1s because people are hesitant to do so. Last week, my 5-1 build is what took down the tournament. So those things happen. And if you're anticipating the game to go that route, I would anticipate building the same way. Just know that I might flirt with a couple of even builds just in the event that they can keep it close because of the way the pricing is. Emery, 31-14 Baltimore is what he's doing. So same spread between both is what we're going with. Both are going to allow less than 20. Both are going to be scoring over 30. Back, Baltimore has been scoring lights out when he was there. He was averaging about 35 points a game. Miami is just one of the worst teams in football, and specifically on defense. Not sure how they're going to start. He's not sure how they're going to stop both Lamar and Henry, but rostering both one way at captain is a good way to start builds. He's probably going to be having a lot of 5-1 or 4-2 builds toward Baltimore in every lineup. Defense, kicker is also in play, but think you should pick your favorite Miami player and stick with them. So instead of doing some sprinkles, he thinks pick your Jalen Waddle and just stand there. Pick your Devon Achane and stand there. It's hard to just pick two as a standalone play since the lack of upside. It's hard to see him getting there without either one outscoring him. That's the approach he's going with, and I feel really solid about that approach. Props of the night. It's really tough. All of them are low, and all of them are gross. I'm going to be rocking with Rashad Bateman going over 32.5 receiving yards. Again, that's a vibes play. That's if Lamar plays using a lot with the legs, so expecting more deep shots, more volume in the passing game. And if that's the case, I think of Rashad Bateman or DeAndre Hopkins, or even if it all just goes to Zay Flowers, I think the passing game as a whole is way elevated when Lamar is going to be playing. Last game coming off a 51-yard effort. And before, again, it's hard to harp when it's just only happened one time, but had a 5 for 63 and a score effort in the showdown that we played in the past time. So 32.5, I'm going with the vibe of pass game working. 32.5, really easy to get there. He's a big play threat as well, so you just never know. But he's playing too many snaps that if that game is going the way I think it will be, that he doesn't really get to that mark. Emery, on the other hand, he's going to be going with Malik Washington over 27.5 receiving yards. Kind of a similar thing, but a little bit more consistent. So with him, each of the last 2 games has gone over this with at least 30 yards. Thing is, he's just getting consistent 5 targets a game for the most part. And if he's in a play and you like him more than Mark Andrews, it's hard to be excited about playing him if you're not confident in him going to that mark. So 27.5, really easy to get to. He can get there. Last time we played a showdown with him against Buffalo, he literally got 5 opportunities on the first drive of the game, and that was with Tyreek in the fold. So good matchup. I can see it going over. There's a lot of gross, unconfident lines. Like I said, they're like Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely are within 6 yards of each other. So Vegas doesn't love anybody really in this game. It's hard to really convince yourself because there's not a track record of, oh, this guy's hit it 4 straight. Keep on hammering. It's really hard to diagnose props on this slate. But we're going to rock with them, we're going to roll with them, and we're going to see what happens. All right, let's kick off and build some lines. So we're going to start off with Emery's first looks. His first look, funny enough, it's my first look. This is the same first look that I built, and we're obviously remote from each other and didn't discuss that before the show started, but it's really cool that we had the same exact 6. So it's really fun. It's going to start with Lamar at captain, and he's going to rock with Devon Achane as his Miami Dolphin in this line. Going to also pair it with Derrick Henry. Again, no money left, but we're going to make it work. He's actually going to go with my tournament play, Rashad Bateman, low-owned play, and then also he's going to kick it off with Isaiah Likely. I think that's a big boost to him more than any other player per price. $2,000 is really cheap. Just know he's going to pull ownership. So for what it's worth. And then Keaton Mitchell, last guy in. Mentioned him a little bit of if it's a blowout, could get some more runs. Last week had a 25-yard run, 4 carries, 43 yards. That fantasy point output will get it done at 1,400. And there could be possibility for more, depending on how out of hand this game can get in our anticipation. But even though there's 100 remainder, we normally like to leave salary on the table. But you do have the big 3 up top, and you have a very low-owned Rashad Bateman. You have a very low-owned Keaton Mitchell. So even though it is 100 remainder, I think it's very solid blend of tournamenty. A lot of people are probably going to be going with a kicker plus a 3K guy, maybe 1,000 guy also. But with this, you have to punt twice. Getting an ugly play, but it fits. It's the last guy in. But at the same time, say Rashad Bateman, you don't like him. You think a kicker will go off. That same line I love. This same line, $1,100 difference. You think Tyler Loop, who scored 13 last game, has other games where he's had over a dozen points, had a bunch of opportunities to kick field goals outside of the games that Lamar was not playing or they were getting blown out. So if you like him more than Rashad Bateman, that can certainly work. And then Riley Patterson also, on the other hand, for the last 7 games has had at least 10 fantasy points. So if you don't like Rashad Bateman, that's totally fine. Take out Keaton Mitchell. You can get up to, well, Julian Hill's not going to play. You can't really get up to anything. So 1,100 remainder. You got a kicker. You got a big tournament play, and Isaiah Likely. But even though he's probably going to be about 15-20% owned, being 1100, have the highest price captain, I think that really works. And honestly, I don't know if Lamar will be the highest owned captain just because of the injury risk. And a lot of people are really hesitant immediately investing in somebody, especially at captain, coming off an injury like that. But I think that works as well if you want to go that route. Contrarian route for Emery, this is something different and I think is a fun look. He's actually going to put Isaiah Likely at captain. That's fun. And I think that's going to be to afford 4 big dogs up top. And that's exactly what he's going to do with Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Jalen Waddle is his guy in this one. Zay Flowers, that is enough for his tournament play. Ollie Gordon's going to have less than 6-7% ownership, I would anticipate at this price. So even though there's 0 remainder and you have Isaiah freaking Likely at captain, I know there's 0 salary. That works. And I think that's a fun tournament line if you're going to go that route. On top of that, Zay Flowers might be the ugly stepchild, whatever you want to call it, of the lower ownership down low. Actually, Jalen Waddle was showing us the lowest owned, but either way, those 2 receivers are the 2 lowest owned players up top. So everybody's investing more in Lamar, Devon Achane, Derrick Henry, Tua, and hypothetically, Tyler Huntley probably would pull more ownership than both of them also. So I think that's really fun as well. Let's do another route. Let me build a contrarian line because we're talking about big play threats, double touchdowns, or whatever of that nature. Something that nobody's really going to play or look at. And I'm going to pick between a Mark Andrews or Rashad Bateman. Week 3 game, 17 points, $4,000. And then Mark Andrews, 2 touchdown game. If one scores a 2 touchdown game, nobody's going to play him at captain, but maybe that makes things work. So let's see if we can get weird and afford 4 big dogs at top, similar to what Emery just did. And I think we can get that done. So let's go with the big 3, and then we'll all, oh, no, we can't do that. Well, we can try to do a Jalen Waddle, Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson. That's still not enough for Zay Flowers. So we might, if you're going to have to do 4 big dogs, you're probably going to have to punt that low for a play. But that's not really what I necessarily think you should be doing. But with that said, Tyler Loop, put him in 1,800. That's enough for Keaton Mitchell once again. Wish I could get Isaiah Likely. That would be a really fun line if you did that. If you wanted to go to the other kicker on the other side, Riley Patterson, 4-2 build, zeroed out. I think that's fun, even though you've got guys that will pull ownership. Rashad Bateman being a captain, not only is he going to be less than 10% owned, nobody's going to play him a captain. So I think that's a fun build. Let's do a hypothetical where, let's say Lamar's out. Lamar's out of this game. Now we do the Tua versus the Tyler Huntley. And like I said, I think I slightly lean towards a more confident Tua build if we're going to go that route. So let's say Lamar's out, Tyler Huntley's in, and let's see what we can build. If that's the case, I think Derrick Henry might have 25 plus rush attempts and 100 plus yard upside, double touchdown upside, all that good stuff. So he's going at my captain. And then I'm going to try to pair. I don't even think I can. It's not even possible to do this. Actually, it kind of is. If you wanted to punt all the way to the bottom, you could do a Keaton Mitchell and then minimum price guy. I think I brought up with D. Eskridge and Julian Hill, likely to miss. But if you hypothetically did that, you could go all the way down. Let's say Cedric Wilson gets more look and love, and last guy in being Greg Dulcich. That's 5-1. That's way too many Dolphins in there. You can try to pivot. Let's see if we can get a little different. Let's do Tyler Huntley instead, and let's do, instead of Devon Achane to save some salary, let's do Jalen Waddle and Tua Tagovailoa. With that said, you can go with Isaiah Likely. Last guy in being a 1,300. That's enough for Des Walker. Jalen Wright, who, I mean, he had 10 touches last week. I know it was a game script that's not going to be this time, but that's a thing. You could do double tight end 2. That's fun. 700 remainder. Or you can try to go down at captain a little bit. Let's say you go to Jalen Waddle, who has more upside at captain. In this regard, put Derrick Henry back in the game. That's 1,600. Now that's enough for a Charlie Kohler or Keaton Mitchell. Once again, that's kind of one that's organically falling into my lines. I might scare myself into playing 2 of him, which might be crazy, but I like being crazy on certain slates like this. Let's do another look. Let's try to do double quarterback. If you go in the event Lamar is out, but you want Tua and Tyler Huntley, how will you do that? Well, it's probably going to be tough to afford all the guys up top. It really will be. But let's say you find out a cheap captain that you like. Isaiah Likely probably can do that. I don't know if you feel good about it. So in the event that you did that, you're fading Derrick Henry, which is terrifying because he might be the highest owned player on the slate. But that's enough for Tyler Loop. And say you think Devon Achane, he's not going to score as much as Derrick Henry. Same line, put in the kicker. 400 remainder. It's going to be less duped than the other way around. 4-2 build, but you got Jalen Waddle with the stack of Tua. Tyler Huntley, kind of weirdly stacked, but it is what it is. He's a unique quarterback because he doesn't throw it a ton and he rushes a ton. And he can get there by himself naked a lot, similar to what Marcus Mariota, if people built with him last night on the Monday night game. But it's worth noting. I think that this could be a kicker slate. Let's see if a kicker captain is in the works for this guy. Put Devon Achane. We've been fading him too much. I think I'm probably going to want to get two-thirds of my lines with him. We'll just see what happens, though. I think in this event, let's say Lamar's playing, and let's see last guy's in. This is probably going to be double kicker. If it is, or if you didn't like that, let's say you wanted to go double tight end with Lamar Jackson, a captain, Derrick Henry, Devon Achane, and then you get Mark Andrews. If you don't like that, you can also go as a pivot to Jalen Waddle, and that's enough for Rashad Bateman. That's fun. I like that build. 5-1, standalone play being Jalen Waddle. He can still get there. That's a fun build that you can see Lamar's going to pass a lot. Two people are going to benefit from that. Henry's going to get his 1 to 2 touchdowns plus 100 yards. And Tyler Loop's going to have 13 or 2 to 3 field goal opportunities, and they're going to be long. Let's do one more build and we'll get out of here. Let's say it is, I want to build around Tyler Huntley, but passing wise, he's going to score 2 passing touchdowns. How is that going to work and how is that going to happen? Haven't really said Zay Flowers' name much, so let's try to put him in on this line. I'm still going to say I want Derrick Henry, and then let's see what we can do. Tyler Huntley, Zay Flowers. You got 4,700 remainder per. Pretty tough. But that goes down to double punt, which is Isaiah Likely, Keaton Mitchell, similar to what we built earlier. If you wanted to punt even lower, let's say you get Cedric Wilson in there, that's enough for Tanner Connor, if you can say that with a straight face. Also Tylen Wallace for what it's worth, or you can just go up to Devon Achane, and that's enough for Isaiah Likely still. Isaiah is going to fall into a lot of people's lines. I would anticipate being $2,000, being a name value, all that stuff. Kind of similar to what Darnell Washington was doing without the production yet. It's like everybody's anticipating the breakout happening, but it's a 4-2 build, multiple pass catchers. You still have Derrick Henry getting there for the upside, and you get the big dolphin. I think every line probably needs to have Devon Achane or Jalen Waddle in this one. I'd probably pick one or the other in most and put Derrick Henry in most lines, and then also float around with some Zay Flowers, float around with everybody else. With that said, guys, that's all I got for you. I know that was a little bit longer of a breakdown, but we appreciate you tuning in. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe. Tell us what you think. How are you going to be approaching building this week? I know it's a weird game. It could be a boring game, but it doesn't have to be boring if we're building right. I'm excited to see how this contest plays out. Really excited for you guys to cash and make some money as well. Be in the Discord. We usually put our lines out 30 minutes to an hour before the kickoff. Really exciting things, really exciting times. It's week 9 already. We're halfway through the season and we got a whole lot of profiting left to go, and I'm excited to do it all with you. So we will see you guys on the next one.